Hello and welcome to Current Affairs on JTV. Today we have a special BDS programme for you where we are going to be looking at the issue of the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign against Israel with two expert speakers. Firstly, Ronnie Barkan, who's a BDS activist and a co-founder of Boycott From Within, a group in Israel. And secondly, Mazig, who is a writer and activist, but also served for 5 years as a humanitarian officer in the IDF in the West Bank. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Now, Ronnie, as you are essentially the case for the prosecution today, I'll start with you. Why do you believe in BDS? Because it's a fairly, I think we'll all agree, it's a fairly draconian solution to a problem. What's the issue as far as you can see it?
I would regard BDS very differently. I think that BDS is a no-brainer. It is the very first step in order to end Israeli crimes, and we're talking about a long list of crimes under international law and so on, mainly belligerent occupation, colonialism, and apartheid. And when we talk about apartheid, this is a very serious crime under international law. It is one of a few crimes, along with genocide, that is regarded as a crime against humanity. Okay, but you've said several things, so maybe go into that. If Israel does practice apartheid, then it means that the global community is obligated to fight against this and to end that. And this is what BDS is about. It is simply about ending Israeli crimes and insisting that it respects its obligations under international law. That is all.
Now, you say apartheid. That's probably the strongest charge you've laid there. Why do you think Israel actually practices apartheid? So what does that mean to you?
Yeah, you were about to ask if I'm a legal scholar or anything like that, so I came prepared. Basically, there is a very well-written UN report. Your audience may be familiar with that. I'm sure you are.
Could you just read it out, perhaps the title?
Yes, the title is Israeli Practices Towards the Palestinian People and the Question of Apartheid. And I could already read from the executive summary if you're interested.
Well, or
maybe you would like to post the link. I will post some links for the audience. So, you know, if they would like to go to bit.ly/JTV links, all undercase, all lowercase, they are welcome to see some links there. And basically, the report concludes, or the executive summary concludes, saying that the weight of the evidence supports beyond a reasonable doubt the proposition that Israel is guilty of imposing an apartheid regime on the Palestinian people, which amounts to the commission of a crime against humanity, the prohibition of which is considered jus cogens in international customary law, and on and on.
But let me just come back on that. What is it? Okay, there are lots of reports that say lots of different things. I'm asking you personally.
It is a very well-defined crime under international law. This is the main issue. Some people would like to compare it to the previous case of apartheid in South Africa, and there are many similarities. Actually, many of those who were fighting apartheid back then say that the Israeli case of apartheid is far worse. I would argue that Israel is an apartheid state by design.
But can you just define it in one sentence? What is it that makes Israel an apartheid state?
Yes, according to the law, and according also to most people's understandings, when there is a systemic racial or ethnic supremacy of one group over another, which is done, as I said, in a systemic way, which is basically meant to give privileges to a select group and to deny the basic rights of the others, that would fall under the definition of apartheid.
Okay. Right, Chen, you've heard all of that. You've heard the issue of why BDS is needed, and also this idea that Israel is a systemic oppressor, I suspect, in terms of as an apartheid state. What is your riposte to that?
Well, first of all, it was hard to hold myself. Several things. First of all, as Ronnie is trying to avoid defining what apartheid is over and over again, and referring to UN reports, the same UN that is saying that Palestinian women are being beaten by their husbands because of Israel. That's the same UN. The same UN that is being run by Saudi Arabia, that the Human Rights Council is being controlled by Arab countries that are oppressing women and LGBTQ and actually practicing apartheid throughout the Middle East. This is the UN that the report is from. So we should take it into consideration.
Well, I've already said, let's forget about the report. Right. Let's talk about your own personal definitions.
Right. And if we are talking about apartheid, about racial segregation that is based on race, I mean, the notion that Israel would be able to even for me, as someone that is, my mom is from Iraq, so I guess Arab country, and my dad is from North Africa. He's part of the Berbers, the most indigenous tribe to North Africa. I am Jewish, so to go through this, I mean, I can't even comprehend how to pick and choose who's an Arab and who's not, and who's Jewish. We are 60% of Israeli Jews are actually Jews from the Middle East. So to say or to bring up the notion that there is a segregation based on race is just ridiculous. That's first. Second, if we are talking about I mean, the definition itself is a problem, because if you are saying that Israel is an apartheid state, you're saying that Israel has no right to exist and it's a country that has no legitimacy, and that's terrible for someone to say that, especially given the fact that most of the world, most of the countries and leaders around the world, from France to Germany, with the Social Democratic Party in Germany just passing, condemning BDS and calling it anti-Semitic, because it is anti-Semitic in its nature. The fact that people would focus on Israel, on the only Jewish state, while not perfect, I would be the first to say that Israel is not perfect, but we have a lot of things to work on. But in 70 years, being able to rebuild a country of indigenous people that return to their homeland, and actually able to, again, not perfect, but able to correct itself, and it is a democracy. So to fight against only the Jewish state while ignoring human rights violations throughout the Middle East, while ignoring the fact that Palestinians are oppressing women, oppressing LGBTQ, when and all along the head of the Palestinian Authority, the one that Ronnie is speaking here for, not officially, but with the statements, is basically channeling or repeating the statements that are coming from Palestinian officials. He's just building himself a mansion in Ramallah for $12 million. So the whole notion that, I mean, the fact that people like Ronnie are being used to propagate for Palestinians and for oil countries like Saudi Arabia that has a lot of interest in it, Qatar, other countries that are actually promoting this narrative, because as long as the spotlight would be on Israel, we can ignore the human rights violations. So to ignore it and to say Israel is the problem in the Middle East, while 57 Arab Muslim countries are every day oppressing women, oppressing LGBTQ, oppressing minorities, enslaving black people, enslaving Asians in Qatar. The fact that Palestinians use the word abid as a slave, the word abid, I mean, my family speaks Arabic, I'm coming from an Arabic-speaking country. Just one second, family. So there's a lot of things that he would like to ignore in his focus on Israel, but that comes from an agenda.
Okay. Are you in the pay of the Palestinians, or are you doing the work of the Palestinians in this?
I'm doing the work of any decent human being, especially so since I am among the privileged group in this very really barbaric apartheid state. And since I'm among the privileged group, obviously that means that I carry more responsibility. Now, I wouldn't touch on all of the talking points that Chen went through, because that would take hours. But pretty much all of them were false.
All of my points were false.
Yes, all your points were false, other than the factual data that you gave, that you are coming, your origin is from Arab countries and so on. That, obviously, I will not argue with. Now,
hold on. Are you saying, for example, that Israel is not a democracy?
Israel was never a democracy, not even to begin with. As I said before, Israel was founded from the ground up as an apartheid state. Israel was founded on the basis of ethnic cleansing. Israel was founded on the basis of ethnic cleansing, driving away the indigenous people from their home. Over 700,000 people have been. Over 700,000 people, indigenous people, have been expelled from their homes, and to this day they are denied the right to come back home. And ever since, there has been a legal system that was put in place that neatly falls under the legal definition of the crime of apartheid. Even before apartheid was defined under international law, only 19 years later, came the brutal military occupation of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, also the Golan Heights, which is under the Syrian Golan, which is under a different category, and all of these to this day carry on. There's a long list of crimes. Now, the BDS campaign demands that Israel respects its obligations under international law, and there are exactly 3 demands there. One is ending of that harsh, brutal military occupation of 1967. Obviously, the people who live under that brutal occupation deserve to be free from that occupation. Secondly, equality for those who are currently second-class citizens inside Israel. 20% of the population are not among the privileged group, and therefore they are discriminated against in every possible way, both by law and in practice.
In what ways?
Just
give an example.
There's more than
because there is a Supreme Court judge that is a Muslim.
The Supreme Court is the main vehicle of apartheid. The Israeli Supreme Court is the main
Muslim
vehicle
Supreme
of
Court
apartheid.
judge, the Israeli Muslim Supreme Court judge is part of the apartheid regime.
Absolutely.
And the Arab parties in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament,
also in
are part of that.
There were those who collaborated with the regime. Now,
sorry, can I just understand? You're saying, are you saying the Supreme Court justice who he's referring to is a collaborator?
I'm saying that he is part and parcel of the criminal apartheid regime.
And those parties, those political parties, and those political parties, the Arab political parties in the Knesset?
I do not vote for the apartheid parliament, which is the Knesset, simply because it carries no legitimacy.
Okay, but are you saying that anyone who does participate is therefore collaborating?
You know that according to the law, according to the election law, the basic law of the Knesset, a political party cannot run for elections if it denies Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. So basically any party that demands the democratization of Israel and denies the inherent ethnic supremacy of the state, and this is also written here in the report, the very good report by two excellent legal scholars, any party that denies the ethnic supremacist character of the state cannot even run for elections. Now there is also an amendment to that law saying that not only the platform of that party would deem it basically unelectable, but also any representative who expresses themselves even in writing or over Facebook denying Israel as an ethnic supremacist state, denying the legitimacy of an ethnic supremacist state, will not be able to run for elections. So this is by law. Okay.
If I can distill your argument.
I do not participate in the elections in Israel.
I understand.
Because I do not see the legitimacy of that. But let me go to the three main points of the BDS campaign.
Third point, yes.
Freedom from the military occupation, equality for those who are currently second-class citizens, okay, what we call Palestine, living in Palestine 48, and finally, and most importantly, the rights of the refugees, those who have been expelled in 1948. Actually, they were expelled even before the foundation of the state. 1/3 of the population was expelled even before the state was founded, and to this day, they are denied the right to come back home. So it is quite Orwellian of you to discuss the rights of the indigenous people who came in and usurped the land and drove away the indigenous people, rather than dealing with the rights of those who have been expelled from there. And why don't you just simply accept their right, just like our right, to live there as equals?
So we have a right to live there. Because according to you, we don't have a right to live there.
No one that I know that supports BDS is in favor of another ethnic cleansing just in order to fix the previous one. That's far from it. It's exactly the opposite. We are demanding equality. We are demanding equality, freedom, and justice.
And you want it to be
for all
Palestine.
the sons and daughters of the land. There are 18 million people who are regarded. There are 18 million people who are regarded as, who I would regard as the sons and daughters of the land, 6 million Israelis, Israeli Jews as they are referred to, and 12 million Palestinians, half of which are in forced exile for 7 decades. So all of these people have the right to live in equality, freedom, and justice. Would you argue with that?
I would argue with every single point that you made, seriously, because you are, if you're accusing me in making false argument, but you are making false arguments. Let's start with ethnic cleansing, the ethnic cleansing that you keep on talking about and throwing out there. There's no ethnic cleansing. The fact that there are Muslims living in Israel is just a fact to it. How many Jews live in the Middle East, by the way? How many Jews live in Iraq, where my family was forced out of in 1951? How many Jews live in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Egypt? If you want to talk about ethnic cleansing, there was an ethnic cleansing in the Middle East, and was an ethnic cleansing of Jews from Arab and Muslim countries and from North Africa, like my family. So that's the first point, that this is facts. You can't really argue with that. 850,000 people that lost everything they have, $30 billion in property, and I still don't have my justice. And by the way, people like you don't speak for my justice.
Do these people have rights? Those who have been expelled from Arab countries, do they have rights? For their property, possibly if they would like to come back? Do they have rights?
Can I go back to Iraq? Can I go back to Tunisia?
Look, I carry a
Let's talk about the Ethiopian war that we were.
Look,
right.
This is how it works.
I understand, because you are privileged, and this is where it comes from. I am not privileged, and while you are a straight white male that is coming from very privileged background in Rwanda.
You should stick to one talking point rather than jumping between one to another. Okay, there's whataboutism, and then there's the pinkwashing, and then there's the others.
Oh, pinkwashing.
Now, let's go back. Look, welcome to reality. I carry a European passport these days simply because my dad was born in some Eastern European country. He left it when he was a baby. He doesn't speak the language. He doesn't know anything about that country. I don't speak the language, and I don't know anything about that country. And it was so easy for me to get that passport. Why is that? Because this is how things work.
So you are arguing for my rights to get a passport in Iraq, in Tunisia, and in all other 57 Muslim Arab countries that strip me out from my rights and my property and my land and killed my great-grandfather? Are you arguing for that? Because if you are, that's fine. Because then we can have this conversation. But you are focusing on Israel as the Jewish state. That's the only thing that bothers you.
Indigenous people have rights.
Indigenous people, I agree. That's why Israel exists, because it's the Jewish state. Right. We were forced from our land, and we came back to our indigenous homeland.
Not a Jewish state. You are conflating Zionism and Judaism.
Zionism is the movement to liberate the Jewish people.
Television station does. It is all about conflation of Zionism and Judaism. Now let's separate the two things. Israel is a Zionist state. That you claim to be Jewish, okay?
I claim to be Jewish.
Yeah, there's nothing Jewish about Israel other than one thing. There's only one thing that makes Israel Jewish.
There's a lot of, guys, there's a lot of claims flying around here and counter-claims, okay? Yeah. I think we have basic definitional issues.
So let me just make that point. There's one and only one thing that makes Israel a so-called Jewish state, and that is that myself and probably also you have Jewish nationality in our ID. My citizenship is Israeli, but I don't have an Israeli nationality because there's no such thing. Israel vehemently denies the concept of an Israeli nationality because that would mean that at least on the face of it, its citizens would have equal rights. So our nationality, according to the state, is Jewish. Our fellow citizens in Israel who are not among the privileged group, they would have other nationality like Arab or Circassian or Druze. Okay? This is what I'm talking about. Israel is an apartheid state by design, and it segregates and differentiates already from birth. From birth, people have two different legal...
Ronnie. In England, let me give you an example in Britain.
From birth, people have two different... Babies have two different legal paths that they walk through, depending on whether their parents are privileged Israeli Jews or simply Israeli citizens who are not among the privileged group.
Is that correct? Is what he just said about two legal routes, and what he said earlier about the 80-20 divide between the percentages of populations? Is there discrimination against Israel's Arab minority in that context?
If there is racism in the Israeli society, in every society there is racism. If you're looking at the United States, where was the United States 70 years into? You know what? Where is the United States now?
Is there systematic discrimination?
There's no systematic discrimination, quite the opposite. Actually, the fact that he's saying that members of parliament, Arab members of parliament must obey the Jewish and democratic ideal is false, because there is a member of parliament like Ahmed Tibi, there is a member of parliament, actually Hanin Zouabi, that participated in terror actions against Israel, and she was a member of parliament, and she stayed there throughout the time that there was investigation, because they didn't investigate was she encouraging violence or actually using violence against Israeli soldiers. So the whole ideas that he's trying to preach here are false. The fact that Arabs, Muslims can get to university faster than I can, have free access to it. They don't have to serve in the army because of their sensitivities. The fact that there's 20% Israeli Muslims living in Israel, Israeli Arabs, is just a proof to the fact that Ronnie is lying. But I understand him. He's lying because he is paid for, because he has a lot of agenda to promote. He doesn't really believe in the things that he says because he knows that the facts are different. The fact that there's 1.6 million Arab Israelis, the fact that there's millions of Palestinians still living in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, it just shows that he's wrong. The only people that oppress the Palestinians today in the Middle East are the Arab countries, is Lebanon, where there's Palestinians have different rights from real Lebanese based on their ethnicity. The fact that my family was ethnic cleansed, but he would never speak about that because that's really hurting his narrative. The fact that the Arab League is the one that makes the calls. Just a second. The fact that the Arab League is the one that is making the calls for the Palestinians, the fact that Palestinians can generationally pass their refugeesness, and the fact that they are still being held in refugee camps throughout the Middle East by their Arab brothers and sisters, that 57 Arab Muslim countries that are still controlling them as political weapon with the help of the UN, with the help of oil states that are promoting this. While Israel observed the refugees from the Middle East, my family included 850,000 Arab 850,000 Jews that came from Arab and Muslim countries that were observed and became citizens of the country, and I'm not a refugee. My kids will not be refugees because we've continued that Israel kept on trying to solve this issue. Meanwhile, he's preaching to maintain this issue. He brings out solutions that are unrealistic. The whole idea is that you're preaching, you're telling me to come back to reality, but you need to come back to reality because the world that you are living in is not the word that...
A final word from the two of you.
Yes.
Ronnie.
Do you think that a group of people has the right to live at the expense of another group of people? Yes or no?
Of course not.
No.
Of course not.
Of course. So you should obviously be supporting the end of Israeli apartheid and the respect of all the rights of all the people of that land. It's as simple as that.
But it's ridiculous. Do you listen to what you're saying?
Of course.
You sound mad. You sound insane because your statement, and by the way, that's why
I'm referring to everything that's written here in the very well written report.
In the UN report, it was criticized by the UN itself
and
by UN Secretary General himself criticizing this report.
Leaders
throughout the world, right?
Yeah, I'm very happy to mention that because this is not the first report about Israeli apartheid. Before that, there was the HSRC report and the David Bondia report and other very well written legal reports dealing with the legal case of Israeli apartheid. And I mention again that this is a very serious crime under international law. And do you think that we should have been boycotting South Africa back in the day of apartheid then? And do you think, and if so, why don't you support the boycott of Israel
Your
today?
final word, Hen, on this, as Ronnie's made his point there.
If you ask Reverend Kenneth Mishwe that fought against apartheid, he will tell you that he's insulted by the fact that people compare South Africa apartheid to Israel. He's been to Israel. Many leaders from South Africa that fought against apartheid been to Israel and saw the situation as it is. To say that Israel again, but you had your words.
That's it. Good, gentlemen.
One last thing. One last thing that I want to say.
Okay. We don't want to get involved in bringing other people's. They're not here. None of these people are here.
Right.
You two are here.
Just one word.
Very last sentence.
Very last sentence. I think that that Ronnie needs to have a reality check, and people like him. I'm not angry with him. I understand where he's coming from. That he is being pushed to push this false agenda. But I came here to have a serious discussion. There's no serious discussion with people that are lying, and everything he said is a lie. If I had more time, I would counter each and every case that he made.
Thank you. We've run out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you both of you for making your points. Thank you all at home. We'll see you again soon for another episode of Current Affairs on JTV.